They were children, sold like property to the highest bidder, until a quiet rancher locked eyes with them and saw something he couldn't walk away from. What drives a man to risk his life for strangers? And what kind of past was he hoping to redeem? The back room of Murphy's saloon reeks of whiskey, tobacco, and desperation. It's 1885 in Larkspur Ridge, Montana, where gold fever has turned men into monsters and created a market for things that should never be sold. Three small figures huddle on wooden crates. Malin, 12, wraps her arms around 9-year-old Leon and 6-year-old Shu. Their parents died in a mining accident 2 weeks ago, leaving them with debts that foreman Orville Dent claims must be paid. Fresh workers, Dent grins, revealing yellow teeth. Young enough to learn, small enough for tight spaces. The bidders are everything you'd expect from a frontier mining town's dregs. Rough men with dirt under their nails and cruelty in their eyes, throwing coins like they're betting on cockfights. They joke about their little China dolls, each word making Maylene pull her sisters closer. $20 for the lot, shouts a bearded miner. 25, counters another, his eyes lingering on Maylin in a way that makes her skin crawl. That's when the stranger walks in. He's tall and lean, with weathered hands and winter sky eyes. Cold, distant, but not cruel. Unlike the others, he doesn't laugh or examine the girls like livestock. He simply stands in the back, his presence changing the atmosphere. Elias Vane has been the quiet rancher outside Larkspur Ridge for 8 years. Most folks know little about him, except he keeps to himself, and something in his past carved deep lines around his eyes. $50, Elias says quietly, his voice cutting through the raucous bidding like a blade. The room falls silent. $50 is more than most miners see in 3 months. Orville's face flushes red. Hold on, Vane, Orville sputters. These girls got specific destinations. They ain't meant for ranch work. Elias steps forward, making hardened men instinctively back away. $75. Final offer. For the first time since this nightmare began, Maylene sees hope. This stranger's eyes hold pain, but also fierce protection that reminds her of her father shielding them from winter winds. The transaction happens in deadly silence. Elias counts worn bills while Orville glares with impotent rage. As they leave, miners grumble behind them, calling Elias a fool. But the quiet rancher doesn't flinch. He guides the 3 girls toward his wagon with gentle hands and fierce determination. If you thought this was already powerful, just wait until you see what Elias does next. The wagon wheels creak through Montana dust as Elias guides his team toward his ranch. Behind him, 3 small bodies sit rigid with fear, pressed together like sparrows in a storm. They haven't spoken since leaving Murphy's saloon, dark eyes darting between the wilderness and the silent man who now controls their fate. Malin studies Elias's weathered profile, searching for clues about his intentions. She's learned to read men's faces. It's kept her sisters alive this long. But this stranger's expression reveals nothing except deep weariness weighing down his shoulders like an invisible burden. The memories come unbidden as Elias stares at familiar landscape. 8 years ago, he'd ridden this trail with different cargo, his wife Sarah and 5-year-old daughter Emma, fleeing a life grown too painful. Sarah had been weak from fever, Emma chattering about their adventure. Neither lived to see the ranch he built with his hands. A sudden sob from little Shu breaks the silence. The 6-year-old can no longer contain her terror, triggering protective instincts in her sisters. Leon wraps an arm around Shu while Maylene whispers soothing Mandarin, their native tongue a small comfort in this foreign nightmare. Elias's hands tighten on the reins. The sound of a frightened child cuts through his carefully constructed walls like a hot knife. For 8 years, he's avoided children entirely, unable to bear reminders of what he'd lost. Yet here he sits, responsible for 3 broken souls who painfully remind him of his daughter's last days. As sun descends toward the horizon, the Vane Ranch comes into view. A modest but well-maintained spread nestled between rolling hills. The house is simple but sturdy, built for Montana's harsh winters. A barn stands nearby, surrounded by well-tended fences and a small garden, showing careful attention. The girls exchange glances, uncertain what to expect. They've learned men's kindness often comes with terrible prices, that safety is usually illusion designed to lower their guard. But something about this place feels different. Peaceful rather than threatening, lonely rather than predatory. Elias helps them down with surprising gentleness, calloused hands steady and warm. He leads them inside without words, revealing clean, sparse interior, speaking of a man who lives alone, but maintains dignity in solitude. "You'll sleep here," he says finally, gesturing toward a small bedroom that clearly once belonged to a child. The bed is narrow but comfortable, covered with a handmade quilt still smelling faintly of lavender. Sunlight streams through clean windows, casting warm patterns on wooden floors. That evening, Elias cooks a simple meal: beans, cornbread, bacon, serving generous portions on clean plates. The girls eat hungrily but cautiously, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. When Shu accidentally knocks over her water cup, she flinches, expecting a blow that never comes. Instead, Elias simply mops the spill with a kitchen towel and refills her cup without comment. As darkness settles over the ranch, the girls huddle in their new bed, whispering fears and fragile hopes in Mandarin. Outside their window, they see Elias on the porch, rifle across his knees, keeping silent watch through the night. For the first time in weeks, they feel something that might eventually become safe. Dawn breaks over the ranch, but inside the small bedroom, Leon shivers beneath the handmade quilt. Her skin burns with fever while violent chills shake the bed. The 9-year-old's breathing comes in short, labored gasps that send panic through Malin's chest. "Leon, stay with me," Malin whispers in Mandarin, pressing her palm against her sister's burning forehead. The fever is worse than anything she's felt. Dangerous, possibly deadly. Little Shu sits wide-eyed in the corner, clutching her rag doll and watching her sister fight for each breath. The stress of their parents' death, the auction's horror, and weeks of poor food have finally taken their toll. Leon's small body can no longer bear trauma and neglect that would challenge a grown man's constitution. When Elias appears for his morning check, his weathered face hardens with concern. He recognizes the signs: dangerous fever, rattling cough, speaking of fluid in young lungs, the way Leon's eyes roll back as delirium sets in. "How long has she been like this?" he asked Malin, voice gentle but urgent. "Since before sunrise," Malin replies in halting English, protective instincts warring with desperate need for help. "She is very sick. Please ... Without another word, Elias strides to his bedroom, pulling on boots and coat. He knows exactly where to go, though the journey requires facing ghosts he's avoided for years. Old Chen Wei lives in a mountain cabin 2 hours hard ride away. A Chinese herbalist who came during the gold rush and stayed when fortune dreams faded. Years ago, when Emma was dying of the same fever that took Sarah, Chen had been the only one willing to help when the town doctor turned them away. He'd arrived too late to save Elias's family, but the debt of attempted kindness was never forgotten. The ride through mountain trails feels endless, but Elias pushes his horse harder than he has in years. Behind him, the ranch grows smaller, and with it, 3 little girls who've somehow become his responsibility. The irony isn't lost. He'd failed to save his own daughter, yet here he races against time to save someone else's. Chen Wei's cabin sits in an aspen grove, medicinal smoke rising from his chimney. The old herbalist emerges before Elias can dismount, as if expecting this visit for 8 long years. "The child is sick," Elias says without preamble. Chen nods, gathering his leather satchel of herbs and remedies. "I know. The mountain spirits whispered of 3 small birds in a nest of sorrow. We go now." The return journey feels like riding through molasses, every minute stretching into eternity. When they reach the ranch, Leon's condition has worsened. Her breathing is shallow, skin paper white except for bright fever spots burning in her cheeks. Chen works with quiet efficiency, brewing mysterious herbal teas, applying poultices to Leon's chest, speaking softly in Mandarin to comfort the frightened sisters. Throughout the long night, Elias maintains vigil from the doorway, watching this stranger fight for a child's life with the same desperate intensity he'd once felt for his own daughter. As dawn approaches, Leon's fever finally breaks. Her breathing deepens, color returns to her cheeks, and for the first time in hours, she opens her eyes and whispers for water. Maylene looks at Elias with tears streaming down her face, and in broken English says the words that crack something open in his chest: "Thank you for saving her." News travels fast in a small frontier town, especially when it involves the mysterious rancher who rarely sets foot on Main Street. By the time Elias returns from the mountains with Chen Wei, half of Larkspur Ridge knows about his midnight ride to save one of those Chinese girls. At Murphy's saloon, the same men who'd bid on the sisters 3 days ago nurse their whiskey and grievances. But none burns hotter with rage than Orville Dent, the mining foreman whose profitable plans were destroyed by Elias's unexpected intervention. $75, Orville spits, slamming his glass down hard enough to crack the wooden bar. That's what that fool paid for my workers, my property that I had already promised to the shaft bosses. The men around him nod with drunken solidarity that breeds dangerous ideas. These are hard men who've spent their lives taking what they want from a frontier that rewards violence more than virtue. The concept of a quiet rancher disrupting their plans feels like personal insult, demanding retribution. Those girls were supposed to work the narrow tunnels, mutters Jake Sullivan, a grizzled miner with scarred hands and dead eyes. Perfect size for crawling through tight spaces, checking for cave-ins. Worth their weight in gold to the right buyer. Orville's face twists with calculation as he studies his empty glass. He'd made promises to powerful men, mine owners who pay well for specialized labor and don't ask uncomfortable questions about age or consent. Those promises created debts that can't be forgiven with simple apologies. We need to get them back, Orville declares, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to having orders followed. That rancher's got no legal right to those girls. They were sold to cover their parents' debts, which means they belong to the mining company. It's a lie, of course. The auction was illegal from the start, and everyone knows it. But in a lawless territory where might makes right, legal technicalities matter less than who has the most guns and least conscience. Elias Vane ain't gonna just hand them over, warns Tommy Chen, the saloon keeper who's seen enough frontier justice to know how these situations end. That man's got a reputation from the war. Word is he was something special with a rifle. Orville waves dismissively, already formulating a plan relying more on intimidation than outright violence. He's one man living alone on an isolated ranch. We ride out there with enough boys, make it clear that keeping those girls will bring him more trouble than he wants to handle. The conversation continues late into the night, fueled by whiskey and wounded pride. By closing time, Orville has assembled 8 men willing to ride out to the Vane Ranch and reclaim company property. They're not soldiers or professional gunmen, just drunk miners with inflated confidence and flexible morals. What they don't know is that their loud planning has been overheard by Maria Santos, the saloon's cook, whose own children were once threatened by similar men. Before dawn breaks over Larkspur Ridge, she's already saddled her horse and begun the hard ride toward the Vane Ranch. Some warnings are worth the risk of carrying them. Meanwhile, at the ranch, Elias sits on his porch as the first light touches the mountains. Leon is recovering well, and for the first time in years, he feels something that might be hope stirring in his chest. He has no idea that 8 angry men are preparing to ride toward his home. Maria Santos arrives at the Vane Ranch just as morning sun climbs above the eastern hills, her horse lathered with sweat from the hard ride. She finds Elias checking his cattle, moving with quiet efficiency that's defined his solitary life for 8 years. "Senor Vane," she calls, dismounting with urgency that immediately puts him on alert. Orville and his men, they come for the girls. 8 of them, maybe more. They drink all night, make big plans about taking back what they call company property. Elias's jaw tightens as he absorbs this information. He'd known this moment would come, had felt it in his bones since the moment he'd outbid those men at Murphy's saloon. Men like Orville don't accept defeat gracefully, especially when money and pride are at stake. "How long do I have?" he asks, already calculating distances and possibilities. "An hour, maybe less. They were saddling up when I left town." Elias nods grimly and escorts Maria inside, where the 3 sisters are eating breakfast around his simple wooden table. Leon still looks pale, but her fever has broken completely, and she's managing to keep down Chen Wei's healing broth. The sight of them, safe, protected, beginning to heal, hardens something in Elias's chest. "Malin," he says quietly, "take your sisters to the root cellar behind the house. There's food and water stored there. Don't come out until I call for you, no matter what you hear." The 12-year-old understands immediately. She's seen enough violence to recognize approaching trouble. Without argument, she gathers Leon and Shu, leading them quickly toward the back of the house. Elias retrieves his rifle from above the fireplace, a Winchester .73 that served him well during the war. His hands move with practiced efficiency as he checks the action, loads fresh cartridges, and positions himself on the front porch. The morning sun is at his back, making him a harder target for men approaching from the east. When Orville's group appears on the horizon, they ride with the swagger of men who believe 8 against 1 constitutes overwhelming odds. They spread out as they approach, trying to look intimidating, but their formation is sloppy and reveals them as miners, not soldiers. "Vane!" Orville shouts as they draw closer, pulling up about 50 yards from the house. "We've come for what's ours. Those girls belong to the mining company. Hand them over, and we'll ride away peaceful-like." Elias stands slowly, rifle held casually but ready. "No." The single word carries absolute finality. There's no negotiation in his tone, no room for compromise. "8 of us, 1 of you," Orville calls back. "Are you sure you want to play those odds?" Elias shifts slightly and suddenly his rifle is aimed directly at Orville's chest. The movement is so smooth that several miners' horses sidestep nervously. "I'm sure," Elias says quietly. "Question is, are you?" A warning shot from Elias's rifle kicks up dust at Orville's horse's feet. The animal rears and the message is crystal clear. The next bullet won't be aimed at the ground. "This is your only warning," Elias says, his voice carrying the authority of someone who's been killed before. "Leave now and don't come back. Next time, I won't be shooting at dirt." Faced with a man who clearly knows how to use his rifle, the miners retreat, their horses dancing nervously. But Orville's face burns with humiliation as he realizes his intimidation has failed. "This ain't over, Vane," he shouts as they ride away. "Those girls belong to men who know how to take what's theirs." Elias watches them disappear over the ridge, knowing this confrontation has solved nothing. He's bought time, but men like Orville don't forget humiliation. The war for his family's safety has only just begun. 3 weeks pass like pages turning in a peaceful book. The confrontation with Orville's men ended quickly. One warning shot over their heads, followed by Elias's calm promise that the next bullets would find their marks. Faced with a man who clearly knew how to use his rifle, the miners retreated to town with wounded pride, but intact bodies. Now, for the first time in months, children's laughter echoes across the Vane ranch. Elias pauses in his morning chores to watch Shu chase a barn cat around the chicken coop, her giggles bright as silver bells in the mountain air. Leon sits nearby, fully recovered from fever, carefully braiding wildflowers while humming a Chinese lullaby their mother once sang. And Maylene, cautious, protective Maylene, actually smiles as she hangs laundry, no longer jumping at every unexpected sound. The transformation in all 3 girls is remarkable. Good food, clean clothes, and security have worked magic that no medicine could match. Their hollow cheeks have filled out, their eyes have lost that haunted wariness, and they move through days with natural curiosity of children rather than desperate vigilance of prey. But perhaps the most surprising change is in Elias himself. "Senor Elias," Shu calls, running up with the fearless affection that only 6-year-olds possess. "Will you teach me to whistle?" Maylene says you whistle while you work, but I never heard it. The request catches him off guard. He hadn't realized he'd started whistling again, an old habit from before Sarah died, when work felt like joy instead of mere survival. Looking down at Shu's eager face, dirt-smudged and bright with hope, something warm unfolds in his chest. "Like this," he says, pursing his lips and producing a clear, melodic note. Shu tries to copy him, managing only a breathy whoosh that makes her giggle. "Keep practicing. Your grandmother probably whistled while she cooked." "Did your little girl whistle too?" Shu asks with innocent directness. For a moment, old pain threatens to surface, the crushing weight of loss that's defined 8 years of his life. But instead of familiar anguish, Elias finds himself remembering Emma's laughter, her terrible attempts at whistling that usually ended in frustrated giggles. "She tried," he says softly, "never could get the hang of it." That afternoon, Elias finds himself walking to the garden plot behind the house with a shovel and head full of ideas. The girls watch curiously as he begins marking out sections, measuring distances with careful steps. "What are you building?" Maylin asks, her English improving daily through constant practice. "Vegetable garden," Elias replies, driving stakes into the ground. "Thought you girls might like to grow your own food. Carrots, beans, maybe some of those Chinese vegetables Chen Wei mentioned." The excitement on their faces is immediate and infectious. Within minutes, all three sisters are helping. Shu collecting rocks for borders, Lian smoothing soil with small hands, Meiline asking thoughtful questions about spacing and seasons. As the sun sets over their shared work, Meiline looks up from the furrow she's digging and asks the question building in her heart for weeks. "Senor Elias, why did you save us?" "Really?" Elias leans on his shovel, looking at these three children who've somehow brought life back to his empty house. "Because everyone deserves a chance to grow," he says simply, "and maybe because no one saved mine." That night, as the girls sleep peacefully, Elias sits on his porch and realizes he's whistling again. Orville Dent stares into his whiskey glass, watching amber liquid swirl like the rage burning in his gut. 3 weeks of humiliation have turned his wounded pride into something darker, more dangerous. The other miners avoid his table now, tired of hearing him rant about the yellow girls and the crazy rancher who cost him a fortune in promised labor. But Orville has friends beyond Larkspur Ridge, men who don't ask questions and don't care about the law when the price is right. Two sit across from him now, Clyde Morrison and Pete Black Eye Sullivan, bounty hunters who've made their living tracking down runaways, escaped prisoners, and anyone else with a price on their head. "Burn him out," Orville says, sliding a leather pouch heavy with gold across the scarred wooden table. "Make it look like an accident. Lightning strike, maybe, or a campfire that got away. Just make sure those girls survive. They're no good to me dead." Clyde examines the gold with professional interest. "Fire's tricky in these hills. Wind changes, and it could take out half the territory. Are you sure about this approach?" "I'm sure," Orville replies, his voice thick with alcohol and malice. Vane thinks he can stand against progress, against men who built this territory with blood and sweat. He learned something different. 3 nights later, Elias wakes to the smell of smoke in the wind. Not the comforting scent of his fireplace, but something sharper, more acrid, the smell of wildfire racing through dry mountain grass and timber. He steps onto his porch to see orange glow painting the eastern hills, flames dancing like demons against the star-filled sky. The fire is moving fast, driven by winds that shift direction constantly, pushing the blaze in a direct line toward his ranch. "Maylene," he calls, his voice cutting through the night. "Get your sisters up. We need to move." The girls appear within minutes, faces pale with fear, but movements quick and efficient. Weeks of safety haven't erased their survival instincts. They know how to respond to danger without panic. "Is it coming here?" Maylene asks, helping Lian pull on her boots while Shu clutches her ragdoll. "Yes," Elias replies honestly. He's learned these children respond better to truth than false comfort. "We're going to fight it, but I need you ready to run if I tell you to." For the next hour, they work with desperate efficiency. Elias shows Maylene how to handle his spare rifle. Not to shoot men, but to signal for help if separated. They soak blankets in the horse trough, fill every bucket with water, and create fire breaks by clearing brush around the house and barn. The fire crests the eastern ridge just before dawn, a wall of orange and red devouring everything in its path. But as Elias watches the flames advance, he notices something that makes his blood run cold. The fire isn't spreading randomly. It's being directed, controlled, pushed toward his ranch by men on horseback who ride just ahead of the blaze. This isn't a natural disaster. It's an attack. "Meelan," he says quietly, checking his rifle one final time. "If anything happens to me, take your sisters and ride to Chen Wei's cabin. Follow the north trail, stay in creek beds, and don't look back." The 12-year-old nods with understanding beyond her years, and Elias realizes that whatever happens in the next few hours, these three children have already changed him forever. The battle for their home is about to begin. The fire burns for 2 days and nights, consuming thousands of acres before finally dying against creek beds and rock faces that form natural barriers in the Montana hills. When smoke clears, the Vane Ranch stands scarred but intact, saved by Elias's quick thinking, the girl's determined help, and a wind shift that pushes flames away at the crucial moment. But Elias knows this reprieve is temporary. Men like Orville don't give up after one failed attempt, and the evidence of arson is written in burn patterns across his eastern pasture. Someone deliberately set this fire, someone who wanted him and the girls driven from their land or worse. On the third morning after the fire, Elias makes a decision that surprises even himself. Instead of waiting for the next attack, instead of hunkering down and hoping for the best, he saddles his horse and prepares to ride into Larkspur Ridge. "Stay with Chen Wei," he tells the girls who've been staying at the old herbalist's mountain cabin since the fire started. "Don't come back to the ranch until I return." "Where are you going?" Mylene asks, though her sharp eyes already know the answer. "To end this," Elias replies simply, checking his rifle one final time before sliding it into his saddle scabbard. The ride into town feels like a journey through time, back to the man he used to be before Sarah died, before 8 years of silence and isolation changed him into someone who preferred solitude to confrontation. But protecting those 3 girls has awakened something he thought was buried forever: the willingness to fight for something that matters. Larkspur Ridge's main street falls silent as Elias rides slowly toward Murphy's saloon. Word of the fire has spread, along with whispered speculation about what really caused it. Some folks nod respectfully as he passes. They've heard how he fought the flames, how he saved his property and the children in his care. Others look away, uncomfortable with the violence they sense approaching. Elias dismounts outside the saloon and ties his horse to the hitching post with deliberate calm. Through the batwing doors, he can see Orville holding court at his usual table, regaling a small crowd with some story that has them laughing and slapping the wooden surface. The laughter dies the moment Elias steps inside. "Orville," Elias says quietly, his voice carrying clearly through the suddenly silent room. "We need to talk." Orville's face goes through several expressions: surprise, fear, then desperate bravado. "Well, well. Look what the fire blew in. Heard you had some trouble out at your place, Vane. Shame about that. These dry summers, a man's got to be real careful with his campfires." "Step outside," Elias replies, never taking his eyes off the mining foreman. "We'll settle this like men." The challenge hangs in the air like smoke from a gun barrel. Everyone in the saloon understands what's being offered: single combat, winner takes all, the old frontier way of resolving disputes that law and civilization can't touch. Orville's hand moves toward the pistol at his hip, but something in Elias's stance stops him cold. This isn't the quiet rancher who spent 8 years avoiding conflict. This is someone else entirely, someone dangerous. "You threatening me, Vane?" Orville asks, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm giving you one chance to walk away," Elias says. "Leave town, leave the territory. Never come near those girls again. This is the only warning you'll get." "And if I don't?" Elias's smile is as cold as the winter wind. "Then we find out if you're as tough as you pretend to be." Orville draws first, but Elias is faster. 6 months pass like a slow exhale after holding your breath for years. The snows of winter have melted into spring runoff, and the burned sections of the Vane Ranch show first green shoots of new growth. Nature has a way of healing what men try to destroy, proving that life is stronger than those who would tear it down. Orville Dent lies buried in Larkspur Ridge's boot hill, his tombstone bearing only his name and death date. The gunfight outside Murphy's saloon lasted less than 10 seconds, but the story will be told for generations. How the quiet rancher faced down the mining foreman, how justice came swift and final on a dusty street. The bounty hunters who set the fire disappeared that same night, taking their blood money and cowardice with them. Some say they headed for California, others claim they went north to Canada. Nobody much cares where they ended up, as long as they stay gone. At the ranch, transformation continues in ways both large and small. The vegetable garden that Elias and the girls planted together has flourished beyond their wildest dreams. Neat rows of carrots, beans, and Chinese cabbage create a patchwork of green that speaks of hope taking root in Montana soil. But the most remarkable change is in the girls themselves. Mylene, now 13 and growing taller each month, has become Elias's unofficial assistant in running the ranch. She handles the books with mathematical precision that amazes him, negotiates with traveling merchants in 3 languages, and has developed an eye for cattle that rivals men twice her age. Leon has discovered a gift for working with animals that borders on magic. The horses follow her around like devoted pets. The cattle calm at her approach, and she's somehow convinced a family of barn cats to let her handle their kittens. At 10 years old, she possesses an intuitive understanding of livestock that can't be taught, only nurtured. And little Shu, bright, fearless Shu, has appointed herself the ranch's official greeter. She waves at every passing traveler, befriends every visiting merchant, and has somehow charmed the local sheriff into bringing her peppermint sticks whenever he stops by to check on their welfare. Elias watches them work and play with something he'd forgotten how to feel: contentment. Not the desperate happiness that fears its own destruction, but the quiet satisfaction of a man who's found his purpose in protecting and nurturing others. The schoolhouse he's built sits near the main house, a simple structure with clean windows and sturdy desks. A teacher named Miss Sarah Whitmore arrives twice a week from the territorial capital, bringing lessons in reading, writing, and arithmetic. The girls devour education like they once devoured their first good meal at his table, hungry for knowledge that expands their world beyond survival. On warm evenings, they sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over mountains that have witnessed both tragedy and triumph. Elias has started telling them stories about his own childhood, about Sarah and Emma, about the weight of loss and the possibility of healing. "Will you teach us to shoot better?" Maylene asks one evening, her practical mind always focused on protection and preparedness. "If you want to learn," Elias replies, "but I hope you'll never need to use those skills. Better to have them and not need them," she says with wisdom beyond her years. As spring deepens into early summer, the Vane Ranch has become something none of them expected when this journey began. A real home, built on choice rather than circumstance, strengthened by love rather than mere necessity. The evening sun casts long shadows across the Vane Ranch as Elias sits on his porch, watching 3 figures move through the garden they've tended together. Maylene checks tomato plants with careful attention, understanding that good things require patience. Leon leads a procession of barn cats toward the milk shed, their evening ritual of shared chores. And Shu practices her whistling while collecting eggs, finally managing a clear note that makes her clap with delight. It's been 14 months since that awful day at Murphy's Saloon, and sometimes Elias has to remind himself that this peace is real, that it won't be snatched away by men with dark intentions. The scars from the fire have faded into the landscape, and new grass grows where flames once threatened to destroy everything they'd built. "Baba," Maylene calls, using the Mandarin word for father that she's recently started applying to him. "Dinner is ready?" The word stops him cold every time she uses it, not because it's unwelcome, but because it represents something he never thought he'd have again: the trust of a child who chooses to see him as family rather than merely a protector. They gather around the kitchen table that Elias built with his own hands, sharing a meal of fresh vegetables from their garden, bread baked in the oven he repaired last winter, and stories from their day. Leon talks about the new foal, born this morning, already trying to stand on wobbly legs. Shu demonstrates her improved whistling technique, earning applause from her sisters. Malin discusses her plans for expanding the garden next season, her mind always working toward greater self-sufficiency. "I got a letter from the territorial capital today," Elias tells them as they clear dishes, "about making things official: adoption papers, legal guardianship, all the documents that would make you officially my daughters in the eyes of the law." The girls exchange glances filled with hope and barely contained excitement. "Would we have your name?" Shu asks, her 6-year-old mind focused on practical implications. "If you wanted it," Elias replies. Maylene, Leon, and Shuvani has a nice sound to it. "What about our Chinese names?" Leon wonders. "The ones our parents gave us?" "Those stay too," Elias assures her. "You don't lose who you were to become who you are. Both parts matter." As twilight deepens into darkness, they sit together by lantern light, a family assembled not by blood or accident, but by choice and necessity, and the kind of love that grows slowly in good soil. Elias looks at these 3 remarkable young women, for that's what they're becoming, and sees not the frightened children he rescued from an auction block, but strong, capable people who've taught him as much as he's taught them. You know what the best part is, he tells them as they prepare for bed. I get to watch you grow up. I get to see what amazing women you become. Later, alone on his porch under a canopy of Montana stars, Elias finally puts away his rifle in the gun cabinet, turns the key, and places it in a drawer. Some chapters of life end with violence, but this one ends with peace. Inside the house, three children sleep safely in beds they've chosen, in a home they've helped build, protected by a man who's learned that sometimes salvation comes disguised as responsibility. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.